the money is in podcasting traditionally has been, where can I find an extra dollar, right? Like, how do I up my CPM or my ad fill rate and everything? And that is 99% of the conversation for every big company, every big agency, and every ad sales team. Fill rate and CPM, fill rate and CPM. But if you made the episode better, you'd hit another mid-roll, right? If you got people to listen 5% longer, you'd hit another mid-roll. But that's a conversation that's much harder and much less tangible for most people. So if we could make that tangible, if we could approach that problem somehow, like experimentally, then perhaps we can kind of get a little bit of motion in that direction and bring that growth first mindset from YouTube over to audio. Because on YouTube, if you want to make an extra dollar and you're getting 1,000 views, you have one option. You get 2,000 views, right? And that's it. And you just have to get more views. But over here in audio, it's so much more complex, and there's more opportunity for more complexity, but it doesn't have to be that way necessarily.
Welcome to PodBiz, the money behind the mic, where we get into the business of podcasting. I'm Norma Jean Belenke, a podcast and media strategist, specializing in marketing and audience development.
And I'm John Kiernan. I'm a podcast producer, and we're asking the question that's on everyone's mind. Where is the money in podcasting?
Each week, we talk to podcast industry professionals, marketers, and creators who are turning podcasts into a thriving business and making the industry what it is today.
With real revenue, real strategies, and real results.
If you're looking to grow or scale your show, and of course monetize, you're in the right place.
So let's get down to PodBiz.
Today we're joined by Rox Codes, CEO and co-founder of Flightcast. We'll be talking about how he teamed up with Steven Bartlett to create a podcast growth and hosting platform, all of the nuance of YouTube optimization and his background there, as well as for independent creators, how they can max out on the algorithm and growth. Let's get down to PodBiz. Rox Codes, CEO and co-founder of Flightcast. Welcome to PodBiz.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
We are so excited you're here today. I mean, obviously, we want to talk about everything Flightcast, Diary of a CEO, working with Steven Bartlett, building out a platform for hosting, video first. Like, we're so excited that you're here. So welcome to the show. First off, Rox, where's the money in podcasting?
I think it's in growth. I think it's in YouTube. I think it's in getting an audience that actually likes you in particular, so that you're the one that they're looking to when they want to get stuff in this world, whether it's products or recommendations or anything. And I think it's in experimenting to find out what those people actually want and where they're actually looking.
Yes, absolutely. We've had a lot of people come on PodBiz and talk about this, but YouTube specifically has such a unique testing that's required to get it right? In terms of thumbnails, in terms of titles, in terms of so much. And so I think that, you know, it's very different from podcasting when you're on, you know, maybe a Spotify, when you're on Pocket Cast, when you're on True Fans, when you're on a directory, right? Every single aspect of video has to be tested in a different way and to see how your audience responds. So I think that that's super important. I've talked about that in the past with several guests on the show. And you have a video background. So for everybody out there, Flightcast is an amazing video platform for podcast hosting. I was very impressed. And in terms of growth, I want to hear your take on analytics, right? Because nowadays, in terms of data, we're not just talking about a download, right? We had Dan Meiser on coming on talking about the death of the download. It's something where, you know, we're factoring consumption rates. We're factoring in so many different things. So tell us a little bit about how you did research, saw what was important in the platform, teamed up with Steven Bartlett, and then what analytics are important to you and when you talk about growth.
I mean, I would definitely say it's a YouTube first mindset for me at least, for us at least, coming from like working with Beast, coming from my previous company was literally thumbnailtest.com, right? It was A/B testing YouTube thumbnails was my entire business for years. And that was before YouTube did it first party. And I did titles before they did and everything. So we've been messing with this stuff for a long time. And there have been, you know, year by year, the numbers change that we all focus on. I think the argument for death of the download is a bit deeper into like the tech side of podcasting, of the why, because some numbers go up, some numbers go down as you move to YouTube and everything. The big key difference between all these video platforms and all the audio platforms is discovery or just there being an algorithm, right? So all of a sudden you have this opportunity to actually be found as opposed to search for an audience. The audience can just find you. And that doesn't just mean like SEO or trying to put the right words together, because then everybody saying all the same words is going to be fighting for each other. Versus on YouTube, like you can make a video you're the only person in the world who can make. You can make a video with a title that nobody's ever titled something, with a thumbnail nobody's ever thumbnailed something, and it doesn't have to have the right keywords. It can just be really interesting and really convincing. So that provides an infinite opportunity, like a genuinely infinite opportunity, where you can be on somebody's TV, you can be on somebody's phone, you can be on somebody's laptop, anywhere. And the numbers behind that then become a massive driving factor, because if you get it right, the multiply is huge, right? So like
Yeah.
you start with the thumbnail and title of the whole thing, right? Thumbnail and title gets you to click-through rate. Click-through rate is great. Now, once you blow up, click-through rate stops mattering, but that's beside the point. So you start with click-through rate and average view duration, right? How many people that see this picture and title are clicking on it? And then how many people are actually like listening through or watching through the whole thing? ABD will be a little bit less on video platforms because it's a slightly more active, form of consumption,
EVD,
right?
average
So like,
view duration. Okay, just making sure.
yeah,
For all the podcasters out there, I always try and break down an acronym. And so I think a lot of our audience is podcast industry insiders, so we're not used to average view duration. Yeah, but definitely,
yeah.
please keep going.
Watch time per viewer is a main one, but then there's other stats on YouTube that are crazy, right? Like average views per viewer. So you can actually see like how often is your audience watching multiple episodes, right? There's a lot of these metrics, and so there's a lot of things I want to kind of take out of the YouTube playbook and bring into the audio playbook, because I think like a very interesting thing that you said is you have to get YouTube right, and there's more things to get right, and I agree with you. And I would also say there are just as many things to get right in audio, but I don't know that that's a challenge that people have taken on, or like a consideration that people have had in the same way. I feel as though most people are, not most, but a lot of podcasters will say the episode is me, the episode is what I want to say, how I want to say it, and the best thing that it's ever going to be is as pure to me as it ever can be, which is great. But if you're doing a true crime podcast and your voice is the differentiator, the story doesn't have to be. So how you decide on which stories to highlight, do serial killers work better? Do, kidnappings work better? And then how do you intro them, right? Like, do you want it to be scary? Do you want it to be mysterious, right? There's 10 different emotions you could walk into that story with. And if there was more testing to be done, if there was more opportunity to mess around with these things, there are just as many learnings as that title and thumbnail have, right? So I think in YouTube, it's just that the learning is more upfront and center. It's just that those experimentation stats happen to be the first ones that you hit, and you can see them in podcasting because it's harder to measure those types of concepts or test those types of things. You get a little bit less of it, but I don't think that makes it any less important.
Oh, absolutely. It's not less
yeah.
important. The mechanisms for testing just aren't part of the medium right now. And it's definitely something where when you talk to a creator who is, 200, 500, 1,000, multiple thousand episodes in, some of these OG creators who have true crime podcasts, they know these things, right? They know, hey, we'll use true crime as an example. Although for everyone listening and watching, I do not watch true crime. When I'm judging, the Ambies or any podcast awards, I'm like, please don't give me true crime. Like, I can't handle it. I'm too wholesome. It gives me nightmares. For real. Like, it's one of the few genres where I'm like, Godspeed. I just can't. And at the same time, if you ask any of those creators, they will tell you, which kind of episodes do best. They will tell you very specifically which kind of intros do best. And that's one of the things where I think the proof is in the pudding. And a lot of those really OG long form creators know, they just don't necessarily have the stats and the mechanisms to test them early on, like what you're talking about. Absolutely.
Right. So it's like you take the same concept, right? We call it packaging, right? Thumbnail and title.
Yeah.
We collectively call that packaging. And some people would argue thumbnail, title, intro is the packaging of a video, right? It goes down to two concepts for audio, sure, but the idea that it's like, look, you got the same present inside of this box. How are you wrapping this box? Like, how do you pitch the board game on the shelf to convince people to buy the board game, right? And the game doesn't even have to change that much for you to get a lot of wins out of just how you're talking about it, right? How you're framing it. We can get into clips, we can get into short form, we can get into like kind of how you adjust creative or the way that you talk inside the episode if you really want to get the most out of video and kind of like take the next step. But yeah, I think that first step for a lot of video people is just like getting that understanding of like what we say on the YouTube world. We say you should spend as much time on the thumbnail and title as you did on the entire episode. So 50% of your total production time. So if you spent 4 hours editing and 3 hours recording and setting up, then theoretically you should be spending 7 hours on your thumbnail and title, which sounds insane to a lot of people who are new.
It does sound insane, but when you talk about the amount of resource, the amount of time, the amount of budget that you put into these things, I tell my clients sometimes what you spend on production is what you should spend on marketing. That's real. And that could be labor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Like that can be labor, that can be time, that can be budget, whatever it is. But I think it's one of those things where obviously when you do it right, it looks like magic secret sauce, right? Everyone's looking at Steven Bartlett and they're like, how? And it's labor. It's saying, hey, I don't know the right answer. Let's figure it out together. I don't have an ego about this. I'm not going to make an assumption. I want to figure this out. Right. And so I think it's really important to come into it with that curiosity and humbleness of like, I don't actually know the right answer. And also, it may take me an inordinate amount of time to figure this out that no one else may want to dedicate to their content. And that's why I'm going to succeed.
Yeah. I like the number one thing I've told everybody in my life who is coming up as a creator or trying to learn how to do YouTube and everything is like, be a student of the game. And I think that that's much easier actually on YouTube because the metas and these concepts are like almost done to death. Like we've started talking in the YouTube industry about like the conferences are getting a little more boring because we all just get it, right? We've all said the same thing for 5 years about its thumbnails, its titles, its intros. You know, there's like you can make arguments about different styles of editing, but that's about it, you know, and then ideation,
Yeah.
right? And there's a lot of work that's been done on ideation, sure. But like if you learn those 3 or 4 fundamentals of YouTube, there's so much to do. And I think what's tough for podcasting is like there isn't really that comparison. Like the way that
Not
you know
yet.
audience lift works is different from the way that Mopod works, is different from your average marketing, is different from a pod roll. And so it's all of these, you know, kind of bottom up strategies of marketing, trying to find a way to get to the right people. Versus on YouTube, it's just you know, the algorithm it takes the wheel, right? And then all you have to do is learn the algorithm. So,
Yep.
you know, it's like when I was coming up in tech, like all the interviews were doing this one problem set, like we call them leak code problems, which is like a website where you did like competitive programming tests, and you would go to Microsoft and literally they would give you these exact questions. And so then there was this question of, look, do you have to become the absolute best at programming, or do you need to learn how to do leak code? And if you learn how to do leak code, you can get a job. And that's how I got my job at Microsoft. That's how I got my job at Facebook. And on YouTube, it's like, look, you learn thumbnails, you learn titles, you learn intros and ideas. And if you can get those 4 things down pat, which I think you could do in, you know, a few months, like 6 months, if you just with enough research, suddenly you are 10 times better, unironically, 10 times better on YouTube than the average podcaster would be.
Absolutely. And I think for indie creators out there and even, you know, for brands, it's grit. It's the grit of being in the trenches and testing. You know, I think that just my limited interaction that we've had, I've definitely come away with the impression that you're like, I'm going to figure it out. I don't care how hard it is. I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to figure it out.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, you got to fight for it, right? Like, I think actually coming off from the YouTube world into podcasting, I realized like there's maybe 4 or 5 like bullet points of significant, you know, angles I think we can take where we would be able to like add in some testing into this side of this side of the fence, right? Like we would be able to actually bring, because like, you know, some people will say like so much of, you know, where the money is in podcasting traditionally has been, where can I find an extra dollar, right? Like how do I up my CPM or my ad fill rate and everything? And that is 99% of the conversation for every big company, every big agency, and every ad sales team is just fill rate and CPM, fill rate and CPM. But sometimes you A/B test creative, right? Which is cool, right? And you look at some conversion rates, which is great. But if you made the episode better, you'd hit another mid-roll, right? If you got people to listen 5% longer, you'd hit another mid-roll. But that's a conversation that's much harder and much less tangible for most people. So if we could make that tangible, if we could approach that problem somehow, like experimentally, then perhaps we can kind of get a little bit of motion in that direction and bring that growth first mindset from YouTube over to audio. Because on YouTube, if you want to make an extra $1 and you're getting 1,000 views, you have one option. You get 2,000 views, right? And that's it. And you just have to get more views. But over here in audio, it's so much more complex, and there's more opportunity for more complexity, but it doesn't have to be that way necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of building out a hosting platform, what have you seen translate from YouTube? And what have you seen that's really unique in terms of podcasting that you're excited about?
Ooh. What translates from YouTube? Most of it, I would say, in general. What's kind of been a bummer that hasn't translated is I think the understanding of responsibility of the platform in a lot of ways. YouTube Studio does a lot. It does a lot. It tells you everything about your audience, where they are, other channels they're watching, who they are. Like in podcasting, we get downloads, listeners, estimations of gender and estimations of age and whatever little first party data we can get, sure. But like a fraction, 10%, 20% of what YouTube gives are we getting on podcasting right now. And a lot of it's probabilistic versus like, you know, YouTube knows, right? YouTube has your actual birthday and everything. So that was a huge surprise for me. coming into this space and realizing kind of how rough the base data was.
Yeah, and how anonymous people are.
Yeah, and I think the question is, when you build a hosting platform, in my head, it's like, do you consider yourself to be a social media scheduler, or do you consider yourself to be YouTube Studio, right? Because if your job is to be YouTube Studio, your job is different, right? Because your job is also to help the creator understanding and grow. And you can take two different kind of stabs of, like, you could be operationally efficient as hell. Like, I think a lot of the work that like Buzzsprout has done is so gorgeous and has been so heavily focused on like every checkbox that you could possibly check of what an early
even
creator
just their
needs.
AI assistant. Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to our Buzzsprout hosting friends. I mean, I love all the hosting platforms. I have a hosting platform background, and so for me, I always want to look at features, right? I want to look at the UX. I want to look at features. I want to look at, how easy is this? And because creators are not tech people, it's got to be easy for them. And YouTube is pretty straightforward, but on the podcast hosting side, it can get a little bit technical, to be honest.
Yeah, but it shouldn't, right? Like,
no,
and I hate that
not
so
at all.
much. And I'm fighting such a fight to try. Like, the word RSS, the average podcaster does not know.
No.
Like, I'm convinced at this point that those three letters are meaningless. I'm changing it in Flightcast. It's going to say audio platforms parentheses RSS instead of RSS, because people say, okay, well, how does it go to Apple staring at a screen that says turn on RSS? And that to me is like, okay, cool. Like, we are making astounding presumptions about the level of knowledge in the industry. Even people who are running agencies and everything, when they're moving hosting, they say, oh, do I have to do that redirect thing? Because I don't really understand it, right? They don't really know.
Yeah,
what
they
that
don't
is.
understand how the technology works. It's true, absolutely. Migration is a huge undertaking for any show, and it's tedious.
Yeah, well, that's probably the thing I actually put the most effort into. I've had a guy working full time for over a year on literally just our onboarding and migration process. With like customization per platform. So like literally is highlighting what buttons to press and everything, because it's such a headache, right? And I want to make that like immensely easier.
It's a huge pain point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it takes most of these, sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, just most of these problems take an astounding amount of effort to solve, because like the tech is not kind, right? And so that was like really my hope with Flightcast, was like, I will push the boulder up the hill, right? And it might not be as fast as I want it to be, and it might like fall a few times, it might suck, but like every step I take, a whole new wave of customers comes in and they go, oh, okay, I get it. Like, I'm seeing you guys are doing a different thing, right? This is a different game that I'm playing. So that's also why, talking about other hosting platforms, it's like, I would argue I barely consider Flightcast a hosting platform. I think Flightcast happens to be a hosting platform, but it's actually a growth platform, right? Because YouTube Studio, the smallest thing it does is let you upload, right? But 90% of YouTube Studio
the analytics are phenomenal. Yeah, absolutely. And there hasn't been a hosting platform that's offering those analytics. It's very, very cool. I had a look at the analytics, and it's interesting. I think, what you're doing is interesting, because the hosting aspect, the hosting facet of podcasting is saturated, right? Like, how many people are actually creating podcasts? The people that are creating podcasts have a host, right? At some point, right? So for you guys, it looks like, number one, how can it be better than any other hosting platform out there, right? What features, what ease of use, how is the UX designed? And then number two, how do you bring in people? Because podcasting, obviously from the hosting side of it, if there aren't new podcasters, there just aren't new users, right? Period. But it's one of those things where, looking at the back end of your platform, which hosts video and audio, you can have separate feeds for video and audio, and aggregates the data in a really data-rich way, which we'll talk about later. But you can tell that it's been designed to convert people who are creators, but not podcasters, into podcasters.
Yeah. The whole funnel of kind of like the customer base is a very interesting conversation. I think for us, it's definitely like understanding that the best case scenario for Flightcast is the same thing as the best case scenario for YouTube Studio. The bigger you are, the more data you have, the more value you get out of it, right? So there is a conversation to be had. I think a lot of these bigger shows would, like, if I told you I could grow your show 5%, would you move? And at what scale is that a true sentence? And it's a hard conversation to have, and it's an absurdly aspirational sentence to be able to say such a thing kind of flatly. But I think in a lot of ways that kind of is the goal that the Flightcast is pursuing. Of, I want you to just be able to open it and learn 3 things you didn't know. I want you to be able to open it and like adjust your content strategy because of what we told you, or because of what insights we were able to give you. And I want that to be everything from, make a joke like this, your retention drops 3% on average, all the way to, hey, these old videos had really high watch time, but really low click-through rate, like maybe you should swap some thumbnails, or something like that, right? And so many concepts like this, where it's like, yeah, well, where's the 1%, 5% gain? And then who are the people for whom that's a huge deal? And incidentally, while trying to build that, I think we also just built this whole hosting platform because you needed the bottom layer, right? And so
Yeah.
now I have a lot of people who are earlier who are coming in who are just like, I just really love posting everywhere. Like, I just really love all my analytics being in one place. And I think some people like the idea of growing with us, which has been unexpected for me. So
Mhm.
kind of just the idea that once I have that data, I'll be able to understand it, and what little I do have, I can try and analyze. But yeah, in general, like, when you're on YouTube and you're a day one, there's only like 3 things you can mess with, 4 things, right? Like
Yeah.
title, thumbnail, the
Intro.
idea and how you make it. Yeah, in the intro, right? Like, and that's pretty much the whole thing. But this idea that, like, you have now a whole other platform, a whole other scope, that those like 4 or 5 things can now turn into like 8 or 9 things is really, really exciting. And so starting with the people for whom they're already crushing it on 8 of 9 of those things is great. But then slowly working our way down to where, like, I've been very surprised how many people are moving over with, like, thousands or 10,000s of downloads. And they're just like, yeah, I get to post everywhere. I get all my numbers in one spot. I just, I can try and
Having all your
understand.
numbers in one spot is pretty great, number one. And what we're talking about, and what I'd like you to kind of just further explain a little bit, is some of those YouTube analytics, because I think that that's not common in terms of podcast hosting. We're not seeing it on other hosts, and how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, so YouTube Studio, absolutely god tier platform. Just beautiful, beautifully made, beautifully thought through. Shout out AB, the person who runs the whole thing. She's great. The concept of YouTube Studio is it's kind of built to help you understand, like, in hilarious depth, who was watching, for how long, from what place, in what way
Yeah.
did they find the video, right? Like, they'll tell you if somebody watched from the homepage, they'll tell you if they watched from the subscriber page, the channel page, a playlist, browse, so that's like the homepage, suggested, so it's on the right side while they're watching another video.
Yeah.
Every like ounce of data, or external, you literally know if somebody watched it in a preview on Twitter, and you will get that information. And then within YouTube Studio, you can even see like a different watch time per section. Like, so the average person coming from Twitter watched 3 minutes, the average person coming from a suggested video watched 18 minutes, right? You can see all of these metrics, and a lot of what YouTube does is relative stats, right? So it's you versus you. So the 1 of 10 system, they call it, or latest episode performance, is how good is this episode relative to your last 10. So your first 24 hours, your last 10 videos averaged 1,000 views. This video has 800 views. Okay, so like a 4 out of 10 or something, or a 6 out of 10. But if you're averaging 1,500 views, great. This is a 1 out of 10. As of this moment, this is the best video you've released out of the last 10. It is doing better than all the other ones did at this moment in time. So a lot of that inspired a lot of the way that we've done the stats on Flightcast. So I'm working now on a lot of like relative calcs. So
Mm-hmm.
this is your click-through rate on this. Is this good for you? Is this bad for you? This is your view count one day in. Is that good for you, or is that bad for you? Right? Because I think a lot of people get a little worried and they're like, oh, is this good for podcasts? And it's like, it's not about if it's good for podcasts. It's not about if it's good for the industry. It's about, is it better than your previous one? Because as long as that's true,
Yeah,
you're
I
winning.
think I absolutely agree. And I think on the creator side, the creators who are the most successful, I mean, and this is across, everything from podcasters to Substackers to Taylor Swift, right? You're not competing against anybody but yourself. You don't have influence on anybody else's trajectory except yours, right? If you're not where you want to be, you have to work harder. And I think that that's a really triggering concept
Yeah.
for a lot of creators out there. And the most successful creators I've noticed have that mentality. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so I think I just want to be that multiplier. I think there's 30% of like a lot of YouTube is run by YouTube consultants and like strategists.
Mhm.
Like, I think the
Yeah.
word consultant means a very different thing in most industries. In YouTube, like, a strategist is a very common hire, part-time or full-time. You've got somebody just digging through your stats, looking at numbers, looking at competing channels or other people that are in similar niche, trying to find those better ideas, those better stories, trying to understand for you, even if you don't have the data. Hey, is it serial killers or is it kidnapping? Like, what's the story we should tell? How should we present it? What are the intros that are working?
Absolutely. This is one of our most insightful episodes, I do have to say at this exact point, but also one of our darkest.
Oh, sorry. Minecraft videos. Should you be
Perfect.
talking about Minecraft challenges where you have to play from, starting with nothing, or should you be doing a video where you're playing a mod of the game and then you have all these crazy things, right? Like,
Love it.
if you're doing a business podcast, should you be interviewing people who are talking about, like, small business? Should it be startups? Should it be big business? Should you be talking about finance? Should you be talking about investing? There's 100 topics within any given topic you talk about
Of course.
in this world.
Yeah.
And the question is, which of those 100 are you choosing? And then how do you frame them?
Yeah.
How do you talk about them? And even like, how do you adjust the creative to, pull out a clip, right? Because now shorts are a whole thing that we can get into too.
Oh, yeah.
And we're poking that a little bit. But like, Flightcast as the multiplier, like I want to do probably 30% of what those YouTube strategists have been doing for a very long time. I think the bottom 30% of YouTube strategy is numbers. And the other 70% is taste and research and all these other concepts. And I think slowly over the course of the next year, I can largely automate for you a lot of these kind of insights. I consider data to have kind of 3 steps to it. There's analytics, there's insights, and there's actions, right? And analytics is I gave you all the numbers. Insights is I gave you numbers and you learned something from them. I'm interpreting that data for you. And then actions is I gave you data, I interpreted it for you, and I told you to do something. Like, for example, you should update this old thumbnail because the stats show that that's a good idea right now. I think finishing up our analytics phase in the next few months and then going into this insights phase. And then after that, we'll get into this actions phase. And that's really my aspiration, because I think at that point, you have a better argument for at any point in time as a creator kind of coming in. But in general, still, like, that's where the how do I grow 5% from this thing, even if I'm as big as Diary of a CEO, that's kind of the argument, right? It's like you find all these little moments, like nobody's looking at their whole back catalog in that way. Nobody is like researching competitors at any significant scale. So like, we have some internal tools over at DOAC that we could like work into Flightcast that would do some of that potentially and help with like that ideation perhaps. But at a minimum, just that it's you versus you analysis, understanding what's working, understanding where the drops are in your own content and everything. Like there's so much real estate to take on there, and that's why it gets hard to call it a hosting company, because how much of what I said is publishing, how much of what I said is making a website.
Well, I think it's about offering something unique within publishing, right? When you're in a saturated industry, you have to have a unique offer. It has to be a unique product. It has to be new, has to be game changing. And in terms of that constant analytics of what's working and what's not, clips, themes, what has it been like working with Steven Bartlett, and is that why you guys teamed up?
Yeah, he was a beta customer of my first company, Thumbnail Test. He like messaged me on Twitter.
He's a data research guy. Yeah. From just
super. Yeah. We get along, right? He and I have absolutely like aligned concepts. Yeah. No, seriously, it was the same mindset. Like I built thumbnailtest.com, and then they were like the first ones to ask for hourly testing. Like they got my WhatsApp and they were like, hey, can we do hourly testing? And I was like, it'd be really hard. And then like maybe 6 months later, I figured it out. And then I was like, hey guys, I figured it out. And they're like, let's go. And they hopped in, and then they were like one of my power users for so long. And then, when I ended up selling it, Steve reached out and he was like, hey, we should do something together. I got 10 more ideas for YouTube tools and everything. And basically, after talking for a while, I realized the biggest need was probably on the podcast side itself, because all this video stuff was very new for everybody. All this YouTube playbook was very new. And if we could build a hosting platform from the bottom up, I think that we could even innovate on the audio side, at least in the analytics and testing experience. And then, if you can just polyfill a lot of the ad stuff over time, because that's like been done a dozen times, right? Focus on doing what hasn't been done, like you said, and then fill in the things that have been done over time. Theoretically, there's a huge opportunity there. Like theoretically, that's maybe the only good angle that I could come in with. Yeah.
How sane you are at the end of it. Yeah. It's definitely.
I smell colors. I'm gone. I can see through walls at this point. I've gone insane. Yeah.
Yeah. I always have to take breaks when my eyes start to twitch. That's definitely. Yeah. I hear you on that.
If I did that,
I
I'd get
think
no
also.
work done.
I get it. Sometimes when you have a goal, though, you just kind of have to like power through to the finish line. And I think that also speaks to kind of that work ethic and due diligence that creators have, right? You're competing against yourself. You're aiming towards your goal. You're doing whatever it takes to get there. And I think that, bringing that kind of founder mindset into an industry that has a lot of history in terms of collaboration, in terms of the tech behind it, with a fresh perspective of like, hey, we want to host audio and video separate, even separate files within the same episode, right? We want to have detailed YouTube analytics within the back end of the hosting platform. That's unique, right? I think that's an Everest, and you're like, hey, I'm going to climb it. Hey guys, I brought my backpack, right?
Yeah. And so right now, I think we're still a little bit in that phase of like, all right, who wants to come on the journey? But I think in like 3 months, 6 months, we'll be like, all right, hey, we got it. Like foundation's all there. Like we hit the first summit. Everybody come in, hang out. If you guys want to hang here, and we're going to keep climbing. But yeah, I'm really excited for that moment. But yeah, I think that general just like creator mindset of, it's like compete with yourself, but learn from others.
Yeah.
Is probably the biggest thing, because there's so much, like on YouTube, you can see the view count of everything, right? You know how well everybody else did with every other subject. It is literally public knowledge. So you can tell a similar story, you can cover a similar topic, but be you, right? And be the differentiator of the taste. If you can't be a differentiator on the thumbnail for day one, you can look at different styles that other people are doing, right? And like you're being funny or being interesting, or like that's why like true crime, there's so many different ways to do it. Some people do true crime while they're putting on makeup. Some people do true crime while they're like sitting in a bed or something, and there's always like a funny angle, or like sometimes it's two girls having like a
I
very
think
casual
every
conversation.
creator has the opportunity to be unique. I do have to say, though, in terms of that accessibility to everyone's stats, it is sometimes a good thing in podcasting that we don't know who everybody is, right? I mean, I've met creators that have podcasts about domestic violence within specific cultural communities, and they do not have a lot of subscribers, but they have a lot of downloads, right? And so I think podcasting has a different accessibility for people in an age where anonymity is becoming more and more rare.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I think there's a lot of pros to it, a lot of cons to it, but I think most of the cons are just like a lack of, I guess, realism in general. Like you don't know how big a thing is, and that can make it tough to understand, like for yourself, oh, I'm only seeing this number. What's usual? Like what should I be aiming for? Like what's the top of my category, right? There's always this nice concept on YouTube of like, you'll probably not be the biggest show in a category. So you can look at the biggest show, you can say they got this many subscribers and they're getting this many views. Cool. I should estimate that to be sort of the top. Like that's the peak of this mountain, right?
Yeah.
And you have those like numbers. You can kind of judge your journey against that if you wanted to. And unfortunately in podcasting, you kind of don't get that. But similarly, fortunately, like it's way nicer when you're smaller to not have to care as much and like not feel beholden.
I also think it lends a little bit more to really having to dig deep into what works for your audience and to what brings them value. Less of a competitive landscape of, who's at the top of my category, and more, where am I seeing results, right?
Yeah, 100%.
What's my audience responding to? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've seen podcasts with thousands of downloads make unironically like nearly $1 million. And it's just because they were in some niche where it was like everybody, like all of those 1,000 people were the CEOs of an industry. And they had literally just gotten the whole industry to listen to this one podcast. And so everybody that advertised, their sponsor rates were crazy. It was like they were getting like 80 grand or something for like 4 episodes. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, but they're getting results for their sponsors.
But they're getting results, right? So like, and that's a cool thing about podcasting that I think you don't get as much of on YouTube. You still get that. Like there's a lot of people who say like, I made 100 grand with 1,000 subscribers. And it does happen. But podcasting is so beautiful because you have the time and the commitment and like that relationship with your audience, and the consumption method is so much more consistent. Recurring audience is even more common on podcasting platforms than on YouTube. Like people who watch episode 1 are much more likely to watch episode 2 in general in podcasting. And that was one of like the biggest reasons.
Absolutely. That was one of the biggest reasons you started the platform.
Yeah, I came to understand deeply that there was way more going on these platforms than I think any of us on the YouTube side had realized. And that's why I'm like helping a lot of YouTubers kind of like copy stuff over. Like we just took Ali Abdal's whole YouTube channel and put it on Spotify and Apple, right? Because why not? Because like half of his stuff is just like audio and him like talking about life advice and like books he liked and other things. So it can be experienced that way. But like I think there's a funnel in general in a lot of content. And this is like, as you get to the larger scale, this kind of falls apart. But like it used to be this kind of concept of like short form brings in the subscribers, long form is the thing that people actually watch, right? So it's like kind of this short form to long form funnel for some channels. And I sort of came to appreciate like the third layer being the audio. So it's like you go from short form to long form, you go from long form to audio. At audio, it's kind of like I've got you. And then from audio, you can make the additional step if you want to of a newsletter or a Patreon or something, right? But it is sort of that thing we kind of said at the top of like, how do you make that audience fall in love with you, and get
it's more
down
intimate
that funnel.
Also. Yeah, it's a lot more intimate. I think with podcasting, when you're listening to an audio, you're listening on the same device that you talk to your parents, that you talk to your kids, that you talk to your loved ones, number one. And number two, there's been studies that come out that talk about when you don't have the full picture, your brain will fill it in. And so there is an aspect of listening to a podcast and not watching it, and your brain creating an intimacy with the content that isn't created by the creator, right? It's not provided. And so as a result, your subconscious provides that bridge. It's very interesting.
Yeah. I used to I listen to a lot of D&D. Like my girlfriend and I will save entire D&D campaigns for a road trip, and it's 3 hours, 4 hours of content, and I'm in love with every single person who is playing in those games. Like I know everything about them, their mannerisms. I think they're the funniest people in the world. I follow them on every platform, right? Like you really get such a different, deeper audience experience in this way, and that's such a huge opportunity across the board. Getting somebody to spend hours with you consistently week over week is an astounding feat. And so this whole industry is filled with like the highest aspiration one could ever have of building something not just so good that people want to spend time with you, but so good that people want to spend a lot of time with you, and that they are spending different time with you. Like right now, YouTube, a lot of it is the fight for the living room, like what's on your TV. There's a YouTube thing. Spotify's app now has their video on there. Maybe Apple TV is coming out with some stuff. And what about the car? YouTube was never really in the car because it kind of couldn't be. And YouTube Premium exists, but then anybody who didn't have YouTube Premium couldn't listen to a video. So then, well, let's just take all your videos and put them on Spotify, right? Let's just rip all the audios and put them on Apple, because why not, right? And now you've opened up these other doors for people to consume your content, and all these other opportunities for real estate if the content is good, And I think
if
even
the content is good,
yeah. And I think there's a little bit of the energy in podcasting sometimes that like video and YouTube and everything is like sort of this like poisoned by the concept of like clickbait and everything. And there's this maybe soft kind of perception of YouTube content being lower quality in a way.
I don't think it's lower quality. I do think that there is a concept out there that YouTube content is formatted differently. It's formatted like McDonald's. It's made to be addictive, right? It's made to grab your attention. That's the impression that I get when people talk about it, for sure.
Yeah.
Right? It's like sugar. It's white sugar, right? It's like it's going to grab you. You're going to want more of it.
Yeah. And I think there's, the Mr. Beastification of YouTube, as we called it, like probably a year or two ago. And I think a lot of podcasters kind of probably heard that and haven't heard much else since then. Not to use the same example, but like for Diary of a CEO, it's a 2-hour podcast. It's an hour and a half, 2-hour podcast.
Yeah.
All they're doing is switching camera angles, and yes, they'll cut to some B-roll here or there now, and they are trying to get better and better and better at it. But like at the end of the day, watch a Tim Ferriss interview, watch a Lex Friedman interview. It is just two guys talking. Like there isn't that Mr. Beastification, and yet a lot of views, a lot of people watching, a lot of people watching through, a lot of people consuming the hell out of it, right?
Yep.
So as long as there are significant true counterexamples where it isn't just also I got a famous person and that's the reason it works. Like you have a lot of argument for, yes, YouTube is like that a lot of the time, but not the side of YouTube we're talking about, And so you have to always learn to take the lessons from the other side and bring them into your world. In the same way that I'm taking the lessons from YouTube and bringing them into podcasting, you can take the lessons from clickbait YouTube and harsh, crazy child Minecraft retention editing of every 5 seconds feels like a TikTok, and take the 10% of that that's valuable, right? And take it out, right? Like there's faceless YouTube channels, which is just people making content where it's not about you. It's just about like making a good documentary video or something. Yeah. And they'll churn out a video a day for a year. They have like teams and teams and teams doing content. And unfortunately, it's a little bit comparable to some podcasts with like maybe some of the history stuff or documentary stuff. And some people are like, oh, this is slop because it's not like there's no soul. It's just them telling a story and trying to word it well. But those guys spend a lot of time on script writing. It's human, right? You would think it's AI. It's not. It's a guy writing the script. It's a guy doing the editing. It's a guy making 10 thumbnails, right? And these guys are actually masters of YouTube to the point where like they don't need a personality anymore. Like they just understand how to tell a story or frame something well enough and edit it to that point. And a lot of people would write that off and they would say, that's not me. I don't care, right?
Yeah.
But the much harsher truth is there's actually quite a lot to learn from those guys, even if you don't want to be like them, right? Because they've still mastered that game. They've still mastered thumbnails. They've still mastered titles. They've still mastered editing in some way, and they've found the perfect amount of time, right? So you might be a true crime podcast, and they might be a faceless YouTube channel telling that same story and doing more B-roll and everything. But you could still look at their content and look at what kind of thumbnails were they making to represent that story. And that's still a thing that you could take inspiration from, right? So there's just so much. Right?
Yeah.
Podcasting was, I'm going to make my audio, I'm going to make my title, I'm going to dump it onto whatever the hell an RSS feed is. It's going to go places, and I'm going to hope people show up, and maybe I'll do marketing. right? And that was the only word you really had was marketing. But with YouTube, it is an infinite scape of information, an infinite opportunity to learn and become like truly a student of the platform and of the game, and then infinite opportunity to grow because of it, because there's an algorithm. You could get 100,000 views on your first episode. Absolutely happens all the time with faceless channels. And all you have to do is like just know what you're doing. And it's a skill game at that point. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Rox, what would you say is one key move or metric or even a mindset that's made the biggest impact on, obviously your career, but also the success of helping creators grow?
I think the best thing, well, I guess I'll give one answer that's more of a mindset answer, and then I'll try and think of one that's more of like on my side of the fence. But I think that like student of the game thing is actually like, I think a lot of people who would say they are students of the game are absolutely not students of the game. I think you have to be very harsh with yourself when taking that stance that like we talked about, it's you versus you, and it is.
Yeah,
but with YouTube,
but in the you versus you, like you have to be cutthroat. You have to say like, hey, actually, I didn't do good enough. Hey, I can do better. And for people who are doing something creative, that's vulnerable. That's you want to crawl out of your own skin at that point.
It's heart-wrenching. It's absolutely heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
Like we used to call it like, what do you strongly hold and what do you loosely hold, right? And I think a lot of creators, especially when you're starting, you're like early or like something starts to work, right? You think
keep everything close.
Is strongly
you keep
held.
You keep it all close to the breast. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you're like, it has to be this way. If it's not this way, it's not me. If it's not this kind of title, it's not me. If it's not this kind of thumbnail, it's not me. If it's not this exact voice, it's not me. If it's not this intro, it's not me. And as you realize like these small fractions, like if you change your thing 10% and keep the 90% of the actual core, that 10% will potentially 5x the whole thing, right?
Yes.
But you have to be willing to eat that dirt and willing to say, actually, this thumbnail style I've been doing for a year might suck.
You are your biggest obstacle, 100%. Like, and I think so many creators struggle with that, especially in open mediums. I think, when you're dealing with something that has more traditional gatekeepers, like let's say music, for example, or publishing, books, there are more gatekeepers who are going to be like, fix it, refine it, edit it, right? But in an open medium, you're not. You have to do that. You have to self-impose your own standards to continually move the goalpost. It's heartbreaking, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also like, if it's not working and you're doing the same thing, then that's your fault, right? Like you have to take that responsibility and it hurts and it hurts and it hurts.
Painful.
It is like grinding teeth. That's why like, when you've learned enough about YouTube, you sort of accept this reality of, the algorithm is the truth. It will work or it won't work. Like I will adjust. And I think a lot of people think that when you become like data focused like that or in some way that you like lose out on what makes you special and you lose out on your creativity and you lose out on being a creator. And it's absolutely not true, right? All of these YouTubers, like look at Ryan Trahan's YouTube. His last one was going to 50 states in 50 days to try 50 different unique Airbnbs with his girlfriend, but also there was a wheel or something because he understood that the story needs a character. The character needs a good guy and a bad guy. There has to be stakes, right? And those constraints, he still told a beautiful, amazing, unique story that nobody else has told and did all these fun things and gave you an experience that the whole family could watch 50 days in a row to the point where he became the #2 podcast on Spotify at one point with just his YouTube videos, which is insane, right?
Yeah,
but
that is insane.
Student of the game.
Yeah.
They study and they learn and they understand their formats and they understand the structure and then they talk about and show off what they want to just within those slight amounts of constraints. But if you don't accept any constraints, then you're unlikely to get the benefit from like all of those multipliers. The thumbnail is a multiplier, the title is a multiplier. And so that's why it's like, go watch all of the April and Alter YouTube channel. Go watch all of the Patty Galloway YouTube channel. Like absorb all of that content. Go see everything Diltoma and Antok have ever put out about like how thumbnails work, right? And once you've learned all of that, whatever fragments you take away, whatever context you can take away is going to have such an impact that you will, if you can get over the hump of accepting change at all, like you will become a true creator, right? Or at least I would say like you become a YouTuber, right? And you can be a YouTuber and be a podcaster.
No, but I mean, I've heard this from podcasters as well that are successful. And I do think that you kind of have to kill the version of you that's attached to perfection. It's just real, like, and you have to acknowledge that you're your greatest hurdle and your greatest strength. I think that that's super accurate. Well, Rox, what's something that people don't know about what you do?
Whoa. Something people don't know about what I do. I feel like most people probably wouldn't understand the thing that I said earlier about like, I think we just happen to be a hosting platform.
Because you're so growth oriented. Analytics. What's working? What seconds? What clips? What platforms? Yeah.
Yeah, no, like the landing page, we're A/B testing the landing page, but like the main driver for me is calling it a growth platform. Like Flightcast is a podcast growth platform. Right now, when you say Flightcast growth platform, you think of like Audience Lift or something, or like a Podroll type thing, where it's like very, very, very direct. But I'm like that YouTube consulting concept, I think is the big thing. And I think in general, the number one thing that people misunderstand probably about like my, I don't know, side of the fence is I think thinking that video is a format and it's like just a file type that you just like publish differently.
No, it's a different ecosystem.
Not that it's a playbook and a world and an ecosystem like
it's
that, right? I don't think there's enough an appreciation for that yet, at least at the tech level. At least at the tech level, I think that is missed right now.
I definitely think that people understand that it's a different world. I think they just don't want it to threaten the podcasting world, which has its own nuance and value. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Rox, if you had to start over today, what would you do differently to grow faster or smarter? Speaking of growth.
First, I go to flightcast.com. I'd sign up for the basic plan. The second thing I would do, I would. There's this really great video by April and Alter, which is the 90-day YouTube challenge. And she basically takes you through sort of like the, creators first, get good at making content, then get good at understanding what works and what doesn't, understand your own taste, and then sort of experimenting video to video. So it's like for like 6 weeks, you make a video every week, and you just try and like improve one thing each time. And then you like take a break for 2 weeks, you do a bunch of research, and then you try and make a banger video. And then you go back, you learn, you understand, you research again. And there's sort of this back and forth. I would go through that. Like I would go through very specifically that exact setup of kind of what she lays out. And then I would shoot for, well, no, honestly, that's it. Like that'd be my number one. That's pretty great.
I mean, I think it's important to have a refinement protocol, right? And on the podcasting side, for audio only creators, especially if you ask any podcaster to go back and listen to their first episode, they'll be like, "How much can I pay you not to do that?"
Yeah,
I think that refinement process, right? And we talk about this all the time on PodBiz, especially when it comes to indie creators, right? You don't have to be perfect; you just have to start.
Yeah, and there's phases, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Beast used to say you have to get 100 videos out before you're good. And I think these days that's less true because there's so much knowledge of the game. But at the end of the day, like you can read a ton and you're not going to become that guy just by reading, right? You still have to do. And so the nice thing about April and setup is it's, a good mix of bounce back and forth between learn and then do and then learn and then do and then learn and then do. And all of her videos are a great example of all of it. But yeah, you can, right? You can just learn and do. The knowledge is out there. So,
and I think it's like with anything, right? Yeah, you'll learn and refine as you go. I think that's a really important distinction. Well, Rox, what are you most excited about coming up within the podcasting industry?
My own stuff. No. Yeah, I think we got some cool stuff coming out. I'm really hyped. I'm hyped on the stuff Spotify's doing and the YouTube doing video dynamic and all of the, like, I feel like Spotify's going to come out with at least one or two, like, banger shifts this year.
Predictions for 2026.
Yes, this is in my predictions, but I just feel like we're going to see an evolution of video. Like I think podcasting took a step towards video, and then I think video is going to take a step towards podcasting. So sort of like YouTube doing this dynamic stuff is, was always coming, but is largely also inspired by podcasting, however it works. And I think maybe by the end of 2026, like we got that deal with Acast and Little Dot Studios recently, where they're like selling the video content and everything. I think we're going to see a lot more in that direction, sort of that monetization layer also kind of growing into video in unique ways, because now if platforms are trying to move into video and those platforms have traditionally done the advertising and the whole industry is demanding it in some way, shape, or form, I think a lot of people don't realize like those evolutions can and probably will happen. I think everything just takes time. And so a lot of what we're seeing right now is not the end all be all of these systems. It is in fact the first MVP version of the whole thing, the first V0 of what they were able to get over the line. So I'm really excited to see what V1 looks like of video on Spotify and what V2 looks like of video on Spotify and what V1 looks like of dynamic on YouTube. I think that's all going to be crazy.
We're in a Wild West moment, absolutely. And I think as an industry, we're all kind of evolving together. So yeah, it's an interesting take and interesting times. Well, Rox Codes, CEO and co-founder of Flightcast, thank you for joining us here on PodBiz.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun. I really, really, really appreciate it.